The wind in Colorado had a certain sharpness to it that year. It was the fall of 2017, and the streets of Fort Collins were brushed with gold and red leaves, the kind that crunched under worn-out shoes. Emily Parker stood at the kitchen sink, staring out the window at nothing in particular. At 298 pounds, even standing too long made her knees ache. But that wasn't what hurt the most. It was the silence. Her husband, Mark, hadn't looked her in the eye in weeks. Not really. He'd glanced past her, over her, through her, as if the woman he'd married no longer existed. "You could try, I don't know, doing something with yourself," he muttered one morning, buttering toast without offering her any. "I just got offered a regional VP position, Em. They want me to host investor events, business dinners. You think I can bring you looking like that?" Emily didn't answer. She never did. Years ago, she might have screamed, cried, fought back. But now? She just folded deeper into herself, like a letter no one ever bothered to read. The truth was, Mark hadn't always been cruel. Back when they lived in a one-bedroom apartment, scraping pennies together, he used to hold her hand in public. He used to call her beautiful. Back then, they dreamed of building a life together, chasing prosperity, building wealth, finding joy in little things. But when the money started coming in, promotions, bigger checks, more expensive clothes, something in him changed. He saw her as excess weight, not just in pounds, but in value. Emily didn't fit the image of the perfect corporate wife. No one invited her to the fancy networking events, and Mark never asked her to come. "I just need someone who reflects who I am now," he told her one night after a conference call. "This isn't about love. It's about image. It's about values. It's business, Emily." That night, she ate dinner alone again. Frozen lasagna, straight from the microwave. No one asked if she wanted wine. No one sat across from her at the table. And then came the day it all broke. She walked into their bedroom, her safe space, and found divorce papers laid out on the bed like a final insult. No conversation, no warning, just a pen and Mark's signature already filled in. And he'd taken everything: the joint account, the second car, even the dog, because she didn't walk him enough. But it wasn't just about being left. It was how he left, cold, clean, calculated, like shedding dead weight to climb higher. "You don't add to my life anymore, Em. You subtract from it." The words etched themselves into her bones. And as if fate hadn't played enough of a cruel joke, the judge in the divorce proceedings, a woman who looked like she'd never lived a day above 130 pounds, decided there'd be a jury to help decide alimony and division of property. Some obscure county regulation, Mark's lawyer argued. Emily showed up to court with her heart in pieces and saw him, Mark, sitting on the jury, staring straight at her, not with love, not even with hate, just indifference. She wasn't a wife anymore, not even a person. She was a case file. That night, back home in her tiny rental, surrounded by unpaid bills and echoes of who she used to be, Emily looked in the mirror. She hadn't seen herself in years. Not really. "I am still here," she whispered. "And this is not the end." Her journey didn't start with a gym membership or a diet plan. It started with a choice to stop disappearing in her own life, to stop being silent. She wanted her health back, her self-worth, her freedom, and eventually, her revenge. But not the kind that hurts, the kind that heals, the kind that glows so bright it blinds the ones who once dimmed her light. This was no longer about Mark. It was about Emily. And what came next would change everything. The following morning in Fort Collins was quiet, the kind of cold that settled deep in the bones. Emily Parker sat on the edge of her small bed, wrapped in an old sweatshirt that still smelled like the past. Her world had shrunk to this apartment, One bedroom, no dishwasher, and a cracked window that let in more wind than light. But for the first time in years, she wasn't numb. She was angry. And that anger burned hot enough to melt everything that had frozen inside her. Emily had spent too long swallowing insults, accepting shame as normal, pretending that her weight made her less worthy of love, respect, or even basic kindness. But that court hearing, seeing Mark on that jury, it tore something open in her. How did the man who once kissed her forehead every night turn into someone who voted against her right to live with dignity? That was the final straw. She took out an old notebook and wrote 4 words at the top of the page: "I will change everything." And she meant it. Emily wasn't chasing thinness. She was chasing power, not power over others, power over her own life, control, independence, prosperity. She wanted the kind of freedom that couldn't be taken away by a man or a courtroom. She wanted health, confidence, and yes, wealth, the kind of wealth that comes from knowing your worth and refusing to settle for less. But it wouldn't come easy. Her starting weight was 298 pounds. She couldn't climb a flight of stairs without feeling like her lungs were giving up. Her knees ached. Her back screamed every morning. Her sleep was shallow. Her skin was tired. Her spirit even more so. Still, she began. She walked to the grocery store instead of driving. She bought eggs and spinach instead of frozen meals. She deleted every fast food app from her phone and replaced them with meditation playlists and daily step trackers. The first few days were brutal. Headaches, mood swings, exhaustion. But she pushed through. At night, she'd sit on the floor with a heating pad on her back, whispering to herself, "This pain is part of the process. This is how I take my life back." Her neighbors started to notice. The woman who used to avoid eye contact now smiled at people in the hallway. Her clothes started fitting differently, not just looser, but with more purpose. Her eyes looked clearer. There was something electric about her now, like someone had plugged her back into herself. 3 weeks in, she joined a local gym. Walking into that space was like walking into a war zone. The mirrors, the machines, the perfect bodies, it all screamed you don't belong here. But Emily walked straight to the treadmill, held her head high, and hit start. She only lasted 6 minutes that first time. But it was 6 more than the day before. One of the trainers, a woman named Cassidy, noticed her. Cassidy didn't comment on her size or offer backhanded compliments. Instead, she asked, "What's your goal?" And Emily, breathless and red-faced, said, "I want to feel like I matter again." Cassidy smiled. "Then let's get to work." Over the next 2 months, Emily's transformation began unfolding. Not just in pounds, though the number on the scale slowly dropped, but in the way she carried herself. She stopped apologizing for taking up space. She asked questions. She pushed harder. She started to believe she deserved more, not because she looked different, but because she finally saw her own value. She read books on emotional eating. She listened to podcasts about wealth, values, and building a future grounded in self-worth, not someone else's expectations. She even started working remotely as a freelance virtual assistant, building her own money, making her own schedule, growing her own future. For the first time in her life, Emily was choosing herself. The pain was still there. Healing isn't clean, and some nights were harder than others. But she wasn't going backward. Every drop of sweat, every healthy meal, every late-night cry, they were bricks. And she was building something new, something strong. And Mark? He hadn't seen her since court. But he would. Oh, he would. And when he did, he wouldn't recognize the woman standing in front of him. Not because she had lost weight, but because she had gained everything else. By the end of December, Fort Collins was covered in snow, thick, white, and quiet. But inside Emily Parker's apartment, there was movement, purpose, change. The woman who once barely left the house now woke up at 6 every morning to stretch, journal, and prepare meals that fueled her mind as much as her body. Her fridge was packed with colorful foods. Her walls were taped with handwritten notes that read things like, "I am worth the effort and prosperity is my path now." Her body had dropped 42 pounds since that day in court, but more importantly, she had dropped the old version of herself that accepted being treated like less. Emily had traded self-pity for self-respect. She had been working out with Cassidy twice a week at the gym, plus walking every evening on her own. At first, her joints hurt, but she listened to her body, stretched properly, and took care of herself. It was about building long-term health, not chasing quick fixes. One snowy morning, Cassidy looked at her and smiled. "You know, you're glowing." Emily blinked. "Glowing? I'm drenched in sweat." "Yeah," Cassidy laughed, "but your spirit's different. You're not shrinking yourself anymore. You're taking up space, in the best way." That stuck with her, because for years Emily had tried to disappear. She'd worn oversized clothes, lowered her voice, avoided mirrors. Now she stood taller. She made eye contact. She wore color again. And with every pound shed, every step taken, every salad made with love, she reclaimed her values, not the ones society forced on her, but the ones she chose for herself. Kindness, strength, integrity, self-worth. Her freelance work started picking up too. At first it was just small admin gigs, but she kept showing up. She learned new tools, connected with clients, and by mid-January, she landed a steady contract with a startup in Denver. The pay wasn't massive, but it was her money. Her first solo paycheck in nearly 8 years. She held it in her hands like it was gold. It wasn't just paper. It was freedom. "I earned this," she whispered, "and no one can take it from me." Emily started budgeting. She opened her own savings account. She watched YouTube videos about building personal wealth, about long-term financial values, about how money was more than just survival. It was about options, security, dignity. This was her new version of prosperity. Not the designer shoes Mark used to brag about buying, not the dinners with executives where he paraded his success like a trophy. No, Emily's prosperity was peace, being able to buy groceries without anxiety, paying her rent on time, looking in the mirror and seeing a fighter. Still, not everything was easy. There were nights when the loneliness crept in like a slow fog. Nights when she missed the idea of what her marriage was supposed to be. When she remembered how it felt to be loved. Or at least to believe she was. But then she'd remind herself. She hadn't been loved. She'd been tolerated. And she wasn't built for that anymore. One afternoon, while checking her email, she got a message from her lawyer. The divorce proceedings were entering their final phase. She was requested to return to court in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Something in her stomach flipped. It had been almost 3 months since she last saw Mark. 3 months since he sat on that jury bench, arms folded, face blank, judging the very woman he once made vows to. Emily stood up, walked to her bathroom mirror, and stared at her reflection. Her face looked slimmer now. Her collarbones were visible. Her eyes sparkled with something fierce and new. She was down 57 pounds, and not just physically. Emotionally, she was lighter too, no longer chained to a man who measured worth in appearances or money. "I'll see you in court," she said softly. "But this time, I won't be the one on trial." It was early February in Fort Collins, and the cold had turned crisp and dry, the kind of cold that cracked your lips and made your breath look like smoke. But inside Emily Parker's chest, something warmer was building, something strong and steady, like firewood finally catching flame. The courtroom smelled the same: polished wood, bleach, a faint scent of coffee from the vending machine in the hallway. It had been almost 3 months since she last stood here, broken and humiliated, with Mark sitting among the jurors like a stranger wearing her past. But today, Emily wasn't that woman anymore. She walked in wearing a navy blue blazer that hugged her new waistline. Her hair was pulled back in a clean bun. No makeup, just confidence. She had lost 74 pounds, but more importantly, she had gained something priceless: self-respect. Mark was already seated at the front of the room, looking sharp in a designer suit. He turned when she entered, and blinked. Hard. His eyes narrowed like he was trying to piece together a puzzle that didn't quite fit anymore. She didn't flinch. "Emily," he said, standing up a little too quickly. "Mark," she replied, calm and cool. The hearing was mostly procedural, finalizing asset splits, confirming documentation. But the judge had questions. And when Emily spoke, she held the room. Her voice was clear, steady, thoughtful. She didn't talk about heartbreak. She talked about values, about what it meant to build a life, to invest in something, to commit, not just in marriage, but in integrity. She spoke of her contributions, her sacrifices, her labor, not just emotional, but financial. The unpaid work of managing a home, supporting a career that wasn't hers, sacrificing dreams in the name of partnership. "I may not have brought in the big checks," she said softly, "but I built the foundation he stood on. Every promotion, every opportunity was built on my back." The courtroom was quiet. Even Mark didn't interrupt. When it was over, the judge ruled in her favor. Partial spousal support, half the savings, her own legal fees paid, a clean break, freedom. Outside the courthouse, snow had started to fall. Emily stepped out and took a deep breath. Cold air filled her lungs. For the first time in years, she didn't feel crushed under it. Mark followed her out. "Emily," he said again. "Look, can we talk?" She turned, calm and grounded. "I don't think there's anything left to say." He looked at her, really looked at her, and there was confusion in his eyes. Maybe even regret. Not just because she looked different, but because she was different. Untouchable now, out of reach. "You've changed," he said. Emily nodded. "No, I remembered who I was. You just forgot." Mark tried to laugh, but it fell flat. "You look great." "I feel strong," she corrected, "and that's worth more than great." He hesitated. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I needed space. I needed someone who matched my level." She tilted her head. "And now that I do?" Silence. He didn't answer, because they both knew the truth. He didn't want a partner. He wanted someone to validate his ego, his ambition, his status, his money. But Emily had outgrown all that. "I wish you well," she said simply. "But I don't belong in your world anymore." And she meant it, because she was building a different world now, one where prosperity wasn't about net worth, but peace, where health was measured in energy and joy, not jeans size, where wealth included laughter, freedom, sleep, and knowing she was enough. She walked away that day with snowflakes in her hair and a storm behind her, and for the first time in her life, she didn't look back. By mid-March, the snow had started to melt, and with it, so had the last pieces of the woman Emily Parker used to be. The sidewalks in Fort Collins were wet and muddy, but the sun was out again, making the bare trees glow with possibility. It had been exactly 4 months since Emily decided to take her life back, and every single day she had shown up for herself. She now weighed 194 pounds. But that wasn't what people noticed first anymore. They noticed how she walked, shoulders back, chin up, like a woman who knew her worth. They noticed how she smiled, wide and real, like someone who had finally made peace with her own reflection. And they noticed how she listened, not to seek approval, but to connect deeply and with presence. She wasn't just healing, she was thriving. Emily had started recording her journey, quietly, just for herself. Video diaries, daily reflections, talking to the camera like she was talking to a future version of herself, the one who needed to hear she was enough. One day, on a whim, she uploaded one to YouTube. To her surprise, people watched and commented and thanked her. Women from all over messaged her saying, "You said exactly what I feel. You made me believe change is possible. You reminded me of my value." That night, sitting at her small desk with her laptop glowing in the dark, Emily realized something powerful. Her pain had become someone else's permission to rise. Her story wasn't just hers anymore. It was a mirror for others, a torch in the dark. She decided to make it official. She launched a simple website, just her name, her story, and a few blog posts about emotional recovery, financial independence, and setting real-life values. No diet fads, no fake positivity, just truth. Raw, honest, American truth. She talked about the weight she lost and the emotional pounds she'd dropped along the way. She wrote about health beyond appearance, how she'd learned to rest without guilt, to move her body with gratitude, to eat foods that made her feel powerful instead of punished. She shared how she saved her first $1,000, how she stopped chasing other people's definitions of success and began crafting her own prosperity, a life full of balance, connection, and quiet, steady wealth. The views started climbing, slowly at first, then faster. A local podcast host reached out and invited her for an interview. "Your story," he said, "feels like every woman's story. We all know what it's like to be made to feel small." Emily sat in front of the mic with headphones on and told the world what it felt like to sit across from the man who'd once called her too much, only to have him sit in judgment of the version of her he helped break. "And now?" the host asked. "Now I don't need anyone's permission to be enough," she said. "I create my own value. I define my own riches." After the episode aired, she gained nearly 3,000 followers in 1 week. Mark had no idea. He hadn't reached out again. But she knew it was only a matter of time before he saw what she'd become. Not just thinner, not just prettier, but powerful. Emily still had hard days. That hadn't changed. She still missed the idea of being deeply loved. But she no longer needed it to feel complete. Her love, for herself, for her life, for her purpose, was finally enough. She was building something bigger now, bigger than revenge, bigger than regret. She was building a legacy, and this time, she was the foundation. By early April, Fort Collins had come back to life. The trees bloomed in soft pinks and whites. Dogs barked, kids rode bikes, and the air no longer bit. Emily Parker walked through City Park just after 6 o'clock in the evening, her sneakers hitting the pavement in a steady rhythm. She had a new routine now. Walk, reflect, breathe. Her body now moved with ease. She was down 105 pounds. She wasn't chasing a number. She was chasing freedom. And she'd caught it. Her reflection in shop windows no longer startled her. She saw strength in her arms, confidence in her stride. Her face had shape again, her cheeks slightly flushed from movement and spring air. But it wasn't just what had changed, it was what had returned. Joy. And still, some moments still carried echoes. That night, she stopped at a local cafe to grab tea. The cashier greeted her warmly. He'd seen her before. Regulars got that kind of kindness. But as she turned toward the door, she froze. There he was. Mark, standing in line, holding a briefcase in one hand, phone in the other. He looked tired, stressed, older somehow. He hadn't noticed her yet. She could have slipped out, but something told her not to. He looked up. Their eyes met. His face changed in an instant. Surprise, maybe discomfort, something unsettled. He stepped forward. Emily? She nodded slowly. Mark. Wow, you look healthy, she finished for him. I feel healthy. He chuckled awkwardly. Yeah, that too. There was silence. Heavy and real. He cleared his throat. I saw your podcast interview. People from work were sharing it. It kind of blew up. She stayed quiet. I didn't know you were doing all that. Most people don't ask what you're building when they're too busy tearing you down, she said, calm but clear. He winced a little. Look, I know I wasn't fair. I got caught up in stuff. The pressure, the promotions. I thought success meant leaving behind what didn't look perfect. You thought money made you better than me, Emily replied. He tried to speak, then stopped. I chased what the world told me was prosperity, he admitted, but lately I don't even recognize myself. She looked at him, really looked. He wasn't the villain in her story anymore. He was just a man who mistook image for values, status for substance. You didn't see my value when I was 298 pounds. You only see it now that it's trending. That's not fair. Neither was you sitting on the jury that decided my fate, she said softly. Mark exhaled, running a hand through his hair. I miss you. Emily tilted her head. You miss the old version of me, the one that stayed silent, the one who let you measure her worth with a scale and a paycheck. He swallowed. You don't even know the woman I am now. She continued. And honestly, you don't get to. Outside, the sun was dipping behind the trees. Warm orange light spilled across the sidewalk. Emily stepped past him, hand on the door. I hope you find what you're really looking for, she said. But I promise you, it's not me. And with that, she walked out. No tears, no second thoughts, just clarity. She didn't need revenge. She had peace. That was her wealth now. Her riches were in the quiet mornings, the steady breath, the energy to move, the people reaching out from across the country saying, because of you, I didn't give up. Emily Parker was no longer someone's ex-wife. She was someone's inspiration. By the middle of May, the warmth had settled into Colorado like an old friend. Emily Parker was now 180 pounds, a full 118 pounds lighter than the woman who once stood silent in a courtroom while her ex-husband judged her from a jury box. But this chapter wasn't about the pounds she lost. It was about the woman she had become. Emily sat at a cafe downtown, sipping black coffee from a ceramic mug, her laptop open in front of her. She wasn't scrolling aimlessly. She was building, responding to emails, booking a speaking engagement, finalizing a pitch deck for a wellness podcast she'd been invited to co-host. She had created her own platform, not for fame, but for impact. Her brand was real, raw, and built around truth. She talked openly about binge eating, financial rock bottom, and what it feels like to be dismissed by someone you gave your life to. She gave workshops about health that weren't about getting skinny, but about getting strong, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Women flew from other states just to meet her. They cried in front of her. They hugged her. They called her brave. But Emily didn't feel like a hero. She felt like a woman who finally remembered her worth and refused to hand it away again. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from a local non-profit she'd partnered with. They wanted her to lead a mentorship series for women recovering from toxic relationships. She smiled. She said yes. It wasn't about the money, though it helped. It was about purpose, about values. Mark had reached out once more, just a short email. "You really did it," he wrote. "Proud of you. If you ever want to talk." She never replied. Not out of spite, but because the woman he once abandoned had already found everything he could never give her: peace, prosperity, health, and a future full of abundance. She had rebuilt her entire life without him, and every brick was hers. One afternoon, during a guest-speaking panel at the local community center, Emily stood before an audience of about 50 women, some older, some younger, many holding back tears as they listened to her speak. "I used to think I had to earn love by shrinking myself," she said, "by fitting into someone else's definition of success. I believed money, titles, appearance, all of that defined value." She paused, letting the silence hold. "But here's what I've learned. True riches come from knowing who you are when nobody is clapping. Prosperity is sleeping well at night. It's having your own voice, your own power, and your own table, even if you have to build that table from scratch." The room erupted into applause. Tears, smiles, hope. Afterwards, a young woman approached her, no older than 22, trembling slightly. She said, "My boyfriend says I'm too fat to be taken seriously, but your story made me feel like maybe I can leave." Emily reached out, took her hand, and said gently, "You don't need anyone who makes you feel small. You don't need to shrink to deserve love. Start building your life today. It's yours." That night, walking home under the stars, Emily felt a stillness that had taken years to earn. Not revenge, not victory, but truth. She had become the woman she once needed, the one who didn't beg to be chosen, because she had already chosen herself. And no one, not Mark, not society, not a scale or a bank balance, could take that away now. By early June, summer had fully arrived in Fort Collins. The air was warm and open, skies stretched wide like freedom itself. The sun didn't just shine, it glowed. Everything felt alive again, including Emily Parker. On a bright Saturday morning, she stood before a full room at a women's wellness summit, invited as the keynote speaker. She wore soft cream linen pants and a pale coral blouse that fit like it was made just for her. She didn't hide her arms anymore. She didn't slouch or fidget. She stood still. Solid. Sure. It had been exactly 7 months since that November courtroom day. She had lost 118 pounds, but that wasn't the victory she led with. She had gained clarity. She had gained her voice. And that day, she shared it. "I used to think that shrinking myself was the price of love," Emily said, microphone in hand. "That my body made me less. That I didn't have the right to want more until I looked different. But what I know now is this: you do not have to earn dignity." She paused, eyes sweeping over the crowd. "You don't owe anyone your silence. You don't owe anyone your pain." Applause followed, slow at first, then steady. After the talk, women gathered around her. They wanted photos, signatures, hugs. They wanted hope. And Emily gave it, freely, generously, without holding back, because there was enough to go around. That was the difference between scarcity and abundance, between fear and prosperity. Later that evening, Emily drove out of town for the first time in months, windows down, music low. She passed the old road where she and Mark used to go on drives in the early days, back when love felt simple, before it got poisoned by expectation, comparison, and pride. She didn't cry when she thought of him anymore. She felt something quieter. Closure. She remembered the girl who stood in front of the mirror, nearly 300 pounds, whispering, "I am still here." That voice had become a roar. Emily had built wealth from wounds, not in bank accounts alone, though her savings were solid now. She had diversified her income through coaching, speaking, writing. She managed her money with care and confidence. She studied financial values like they were scripture. She didn't fear bills anymore. She had health, energy in her bones, calm in her heart. She slept deeply. She moved daily. She fed her body like someone she loved. She had a tribe, women who looked up to her, leaned on her, grew with her. And she had peace. That night, under a sky full of stars, Emily sat on her porch with a hot cup of herbal tea. Her phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Cassidy. "You've come so far. You proud of you yet?" She smiled. "Finally," she replied. "Yeah, I am." And as the breeze rolled through the trees and the world grew quiet, Emily felt one last truth settle into her bones. She hadn't just survived. She had arrived. And now, she was no longer waiting for someone to choose her. She had already done that. 1,000 times over. She was the home she'd been searching for. And you? Have you ever had to rebuild from the ashes? Have you ever been underestimated, then come back stronger? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your story too.